10 o'clock in New York, Fox News alert. Dueling rallies and growing animosity in Chicago over the controversial decision to drop all charges against Jussie Smollett. New hour begins right now. Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome to a new week. I'm Bill Hemmer, live in New York. How you doing?
Let's get rolling. I'm Julie Banderas in for Sandra Smith. So in 1 hour from now, the Reverend Jesse Jackson will lead a protest supporting controversial state's attorney Kim Foxx, who says her office dropped the case because a conviction was uncertain. Meanwhile, police are gearing up for a counter-protest. The head of Chicago's police union speaking out earlier right here on America's Newsroom.
This case should have stood trial. We felt that the case was solid and that we would have gotten a conviction, and we wouldn't be having these discussions, and there wouldn't be the outrage and the protests that we have going on today, or the counter-protest, which is bewildering to me, why you're having a counter-protest when all we're looking for is justice.
For reaction now, attorney Jonah Spilbor, former prosecutor. Vincent Hill, former Nashville police officer, law enforcement analyst, and private investigator. Great to have you both with us today, and good morning. Jonah, let's begin with you.
Okay.
I guess there's a political question here. Is there a legal question now that she has dismissed the case?
You know, I don't think it would be feasible for her to say, you know what, everybody, never mind, we're going to go forward with the prosecution now. Even though I don't believe jeopardy has attached, so Jussie Smollett would not be able to make a Fifth Amendment or argument in that end. But she still has a lot of splaining to do. I mean, I've represented thousands of criminal defendants who did not get the same deference as this particular defendant did, and I want to know why. The timing of this is really, really suspect. Usually when you have a case that just starts, you don't break the land speed record to dismiss it after it's been indicted. She not only did that, she went behind everybody's back, including the defendant's own attorney. Something really stinks here, guys, and it's going to keep on stinking unless she can explain to us what happened.
You know, Vincent, it's interesting because in her op-ed in the Chicago Tribune, she talks about the fact that there wasn't enough evidence to be able to get a prosecution. But initially, they said there was enough evidence to get a prosecution, to get a conviction here. But because it's a Class 4 felony and he does not have a prior conviction or any prior, offenses, they went ahead and treated it as such, which is basically the equivalent of somebody pulling a false alarm at a fire alarm in a school, which I don't know how you could possibly even compare these two.
Yeah, the two don't compare at all, Julie. And here's the thing. Obviously, the 12 people on that grand jury thought there was enough evidence. And anytime a case goes to trial, and Jonah can attest to this, a conviction is always uncertain, no matter how much evidence you have. Just look at O.J. Simpson, for instance. That was a slam dunk case, but there was no conviction in that case. So essentially what Kim Foxx has done here is not only has she dismissed these charges, she essentially has said from this. Let's not forget what he did. He took something so serious, a hate personal gain. It's unacceptable.
Here is the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago. This was on Sunday on the legal options here. Listen to this.
We're grateful that the federal authorities are going to look into it. We believe that that's very important.
Anyone said he's going to jail. Well, how do you respond to the points that she's making in there?
Then why did she treat Jussie Smollett differently than any other defendant, excuse me, who gets to plead guilty to something, didn't have to be felony charges, who gets put on probation so that you can keep an eye on them. They don't have to go to jail. His case was flat out dismissed, you guys. Pardon me. That's totally different than what should have happened and what does happen ordinarily.
Well, and even Kim Foxx points out, Vincent, that, by doing this, she completely, does not condone this action, and she dismisses it and says it's absolutely disgusting. But then what happens to the next time that somebody reports a hate crime? Or what happens to the real victims out there? And that is the precedent that now has been set.
Right, and if she didn't condone it, why let him go scot-free? And here's the thing, Julie, let's think bigger picture. Let's say that there were two Caucasian males that happened to be walking down the street at that time this alleged attack happened. They would be in jail right now waiting for a court date to prove their innocence because of this whole thing that Jussie Smollett made up. So to dismiss this is totally unacceptable because he went there with a lie. He lied to Chicago police. There's people in jail right now for the exact same thing, but he gets a free pass because of who he is or who he knows. Not acceptable.
Thank you both. Good to have you on. Vincent Hill, good commentary there. Jonah Spilborn here in New York. Thank you.
Thank you.
6 minutes past.
I fully recognize that this behavior, never do I claim that that rises to the level of a sexual assault or anything of that nature. What I am saying is that it's completely inappropriate, that it does not belong in any kind of a professional setting, much less in politics.
So Joe Biden now responding to accusations of inappropriate behavior. Lucy Flores, the woman you saw there, accusing the likely candidate for 2020 of inappropriate conduct dating back to 2014. She was running for a statewide office in Nevada. She says Biden smelled her hair, kissed the back of her head during a campaign event. So what is Biden saying today? Garrett Tenney's on that part of the story live in Washington, D.C. Garrett, good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. The former vice president says he does not remember that interaction the way Lucy Flores describes it. But in the Me Too era, he says it is important for men to listen, and he plans to. In a statement Sunday, Biden attempted to defend himself in both this incident as well as other similar ones that are now being looked at in a different light. He wrote, "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort, and not once, never did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention." On Sunday, Lucy Flores said she decided to come forward with her experience because Biden's past interactions with women weren't getting enough attention as he prepared to enter the 2020 race.
I'm not saying anything new. There are videos, there are photos, there are full-on compilations of him being inappropriate with women, and you can see the discomfort in their faces. And it's been dismissed as if it's just Biden be Biden, boys will be boys, no big deal. It is a big deal.
One of the most prominent of those pictures she describes is this one from 2015 showing Biden standing behind the wife of then Defense Secretary Ash Carter during his swearing-in ceremony. This weekend, though, Stephanie Carter fired back at critics in a post on Medium saying that Biden is an old friend who sensed she was nervous and was offering his support. Instead, she writes, a still shot taken from a video misleadingly extracted from what was a longer moment between close friends sent out in a snarky tweet came to be the lasting image of that day. I thought it would all blow over if I didn't dignify it with a response, but clearly that was wishful thinking. Now, Biden has always had an intimate and personal style to his interactions, but a lot of those interactions caught on camera are now getting another look in the Me Too era. Bill?
Thank you, Garrett. Garrett Tenney in Washington, D.C.
The Democrats will not give us any additional money to do this. They won't give us any additional people. And importantly, they will not change the law that is acting as this giant magnet for people from South and Central America to come into this country. Faced with those limitations, the president will do everything he can. If closing the ports of entry mean that, that's exactly what he intends to do.
That's White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney warning President Trump is dead serious about closing the southern border to stop the flow of illegal immigrants. The shutdown
over into other holding facilities in what remains a very fluid situation. Now, this is one of 6 border crossings between El Paso and Mexico, one of 28 in the state of Texas, used every single day by tens of thousands of people to legally cross into and out of Mexico. And for many, there is now a growing sense of anxiety over the president's threat to close the border.
I'm worried because I have my family over there, and it's hard for them to come over here, so I need to go over there.
Thousands of people who live here in El Paso have jobs or go to school across the river in Juarez. Many residents rely on these bridges to visit relatives in Mexico. And then there is the impact on trade and manufacturing. Nearly 100 Fortune 500 companies have factories just over the border. According to one estimate from an economic development group, last year, Texas ports of entry saw more than $300 billion worth of goods cross back and forth, from electronics and cars to appliances and produce like limes and avocados. The mayor of El Paso says
Sanders not even officially in the race yet. Former Vice President Joe Biden.
And this is not going to end because it will be on other topics as well. That's the problem.
Bernie Sanders in 2016. Let's just have a clip of that real quick over the weekend explaining this.
For me, it's disqualified.
Take us through the coming days and a story like this.
So what the media is up for everybody to interpret. But there's one thing we know, that when an accusation is made, it's got to be treated credibly. You can't blow the person off. We looked at the debacle in Richmond when the lieutenant governor there basically came out and said, well, she's crazy, and I don't know why she's doing it. He blew himself up. Joe Biden has not learned all of the lessons of this moment. And behavior that was accepted and tolerated in him when he was Barack Obama's number 2 and a guy without a future in politics, those things are different than they'll be tolerated in him now as a candidate.
Let's go to immigration. Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, so let's just talk about, first of all, the president's plans. He has threatened that he would close the southern border. A lot of Democrats would say that's unreasonable. But the Democrats haven't really come up with another alternate solution. Is that something that Democrats now face, the likelihood of a southern border actually closing under this administration?
Well, clearly there's a problem at the border. But the question is the Trump administration either incompetent or is it intentional? If closing the border is the answer, well, then why do we need a wall? Why does Donald Trump need a wall if he thinks he can?
Well, he didn't get the wall. I mean, he didn't get the funding for the wall, so I guess this is a plan B.
If he closes the border, every day $1.5 billion will be lost in commerce. So that's not the answer either. So Jay Johnson had it right. What you do is you reprogram, do conventional reprogramming, more border agents, more technology, more resources. All of those things would help. That's not the path that Donald Trump is going after. He's picking a fight for his political purposes.
It seems like a lot of people are picking up the same case. You mentioned Jay Johnson. Here's what I mean, he all but confessed that we've got an issue down there.
Correct.
And called
Everybody
it a crisis.
does.
Watch.
By anyone's definition, by any measure, right now we have a crisis at our southern border. According to the commissioner of CBP, there were 4,000 apprehensions in one day alone this past week, and we're on pace for 100,000 apprehensions on our southern border this month. That is by far a greater number than anything I saw on my watch in my 3 years as Secretary of Homeland Security.
I mean, between 2018 and 2019, tens of thousands more. Okay, so the number is going up. We've been watching, you know, in that fencing in Texas, all the dozens of families with children. So it is a humanitarian crisis, and it needs to be dealt with. Maybe not closing the southern border would be a good thing financially, economically for this country. But Mexico isn't doing anything. So if Mexico doesn't step in, then the United States needs to take the upper hand here. The question is, which is the upper hand? What is the decision?
We have spent years saying if we send more aid to Central America, they will help us, and we see that is not happening. Hence why the president over the weekend or last week said we're going to look at this, and maybe we're not going to keep funding it. The president shouldn't say let's have $6 billion for border security. He had to say let's go big, let's go $15 billion, and let's start looking at ways to put new technology in place to know that drugs are coming over the border, help that sophistication, and an area we're not talking about. How about more treatment for the drugs that are coming in and the Americans who are getting impacted by those? We're not talking about that. The president shouldn't ask for $6 billion. He ought to ask for $15 billion, and part of that ought to be $6 billion, and let Democrats turn that down.
Does that argument sell better now that we hear
Well,
we've heard down there.
Unfortunately, everybody here is acting in their own perfect self-interest. The migrants who are coming are acting in their self-interest. The Democrats are acting in their self-interest because they think it's a good issue for them. The Republicans are acting in their self-interest because they think it's a good issue for them, and they've all got the angles played. Unfortunately, there are no grown-ups in the room who are saying we have to solve this problem that is now evident to everybody. Bipartisan. It is no longer up for debate. We have a serious problem. We got to do something.
We got to roll. Great to see you.
Yes,
got to go. Thanks, Marianne. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
25 past the hour. Got a software problem. This is breaking news causing major delays at a lot of airports across the country. Live update as the airlines try and get back online today. Julie.
Plus, growing calls for Adam Schiff to step aside as Republicans lose faith in his leadership on the House Intelligence Committee. Our headliner, Sean Spicer, joins us next to react.
The folks on the House Intelligence Committee on the Republican side, Maria, are not members of the crazy caucus. These are reasonable Republicans, all of whom unanimously said, Adam, we've lost.
Morning has been resolved, according to the FAA. Rick Leventhal is live at LaGuardia Airport in New York City with more. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Julie, this is the second technical glitch in just the past couple of weeks affecting flight operations. The good news is, as you mentioned, it seems to be fixed, at least for now, and things are running about as smoothly as things can run here at LaGuardia. But this is not just a New York problem. Several airlines hitting the pause button this morning across the nation. They included Southwest Air, Delta, United, JetBlue, American, and Alaska Air. All had problems with a flight planning, weight, and data program called AeroData, which is one of the key tools that pilots check before takeoff. The system-wide AeroData computer outage affected thousands of passengers on hundreds of flights coast to coast, with a ground stop of at least 40 minutes, sparking some angry tweets on Twitter, like Sally May, who wrote, I've been stranded in Fort Lauderdale for almost 3 hours at South Air. How will I be compensated for this? And then Jesse wrote, here we go again, Delta. Why is it not possible to get an on-time flight out of Richmond this time? The airline PR departments responded on Twitter explaining the technical difficulties in releasing statements. And then a couple of hours ago, the FAA sent out an update, and that reads, the issue has been resolved. Contact individual airlines for information on specific delays. Of course, the ripple effects mean that these delays could be extended coast to coast, Julie, and there are some people complaining that they've missed connections, and more could miss connections because of this problem that, for now at least, has been resolved.
All right, Rick Leventhal, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick, from LaGuardia. 31 past the hour now is Trey Gowdy.
Adam is a deeply partisan person. He did everything he could to make sure that Hillary Clinton became the next president, and he's done everything he could since he failed at that to keep a cloud over the Trump presidency.
Gowdy explaining why all 9 Republicans on the Intel Committee called for Adam Schiff to resign as chairman. Let's bring in our headliner, Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, senior advisor for America First Action. How you doing, Sean? Good morning to you, and thank you for being our headliner today. I don't think Adam Schiff's going to resign. I think that would be a shocker if it were to happen. What is your sense of the Mueller report? Whether all of it goes public or not, and whether or not Democrats then, I'm getting to it, will say this is a cover-up if every redaction is not removed from the Mueller report. Is that where we are headed, Sean?
I think that we can't let Democrats off the hook as to where they started this dialogue, which is that we need to protect Robert Mueller. He has the highest degree of integrity and professionalism, and we need to let the chips fall where they may with respect to his investigation. The chips have fallen. Mr. Mueller has made it very clear that there was no collusion. The problem with the Democrats is they dug a hole so deep they don't know how to get out of it now, and they're doubling down. The reality is that he issued his report. It said there was no collusion. Our Attorney General Barr has said he will release it to Congress somewhere around mid-April, and they're still not satisfied. The reality is that A, he doesn't have to do it according to law, and B, there's 2 issues with the current report. One is there's grand jury testimony, and 2, there's classified information in it. That he has to protect by law, just as he would with any other citizen. So Attorney General Barr is going above and beyond what he's required to do. And I think Democrats recognize that they're playing a losing hand, and so that the only way to do this is to pivot further away from what they originally started at, which was just allowing Mueller to investigate this issue. Once he came up with a conclusion that wasn't what they wanted, they had to pivot to something else.
So we're pretty much all on the same page here. Adam Schiff is not resigning, right? But there are still calls. Okay. But Kellyanne Conway, if you asked her, she's still going to, remain that he should. Here she is on Fox News Sunday, and then I wanted your reaction on this.
Spent more time on TV than at that committee over the last however many years, and all 9 Republican members have asked for his resignation. I certainly did it a week ago. The president has done it. He cannot be fair. That is one of the most important positions in the United States House of Representatives. He sees all the nation's secrets, and he ought to step down.
Okay, so we haven't even actually seen the Mueller report yet, so why don't we just wait until we see it? So the Democrats have now subpoenaed this report. When this comes out, do you think that's going to change anything when it comes to Adam Schiff?
No, again, go back to what I just said a moment ago. Adam Schiff continues to talk about the fact that collusion's in plain sight. So on the one hand, the Democrats talk about how Bob Mueller was the right guy to do this, that his years of experience in this area made him unprecedentedly qualified to conduct this. And now Schiff, in the face of all of this, continues to say that not only was there collusion, but it's clearly obvious. So obvious that someone as experienced and with so much integrity as Bob Mueller, as they would have had you believe up until a week ago, couldn't find any of this. 2,800 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, and yet he couldn't find it with this team of top-notch investigators and FBI agents. But Adam Schiff sure can find it. He just can't tell you where it is, but he knows it exists.
Sean, here's the tweet from earlier today, this on the Mueller report that we're just talking about here. Now that the long-awaited Mueller report conclusions have been released, most Democrats and others have gone back to the pre-witch hunt phase of their lives before delusion took over. Others are pretending that their former hero, Bob Mueller, no longer exists. In the end, I don't know how far we push this thing down the road.
I think this is the problem. We've gotten to the point where, if you think about this just for a moment, think about what the attacks of the mainstream media and Democrats were. For the longest time, it was the president was undermining these institutions that we've so grown to respect and love with all this integrity. And yet here we are with the Democrats not getting an outcome that they like on the Mueller report. So what do? They say suddenly that this individual, Bob Mueller, that they revered, his work isn't good enough. It needs to go further. We need to investigate more. We need to see all the other underlying evidence. Where is the concern about them undermining the attacks? The conclusion was clear. There was no collusion. But since they won't accept that, they continue to attack the process and the person. The same thing that the president was accused of a while back with the intelligence community. But now the shoe's on the other foot. The media and the mainstream media tends to ignore this and play patty cake with these same individuals that praised Mueller and the investigation and the need to protect it, protect Mueller, and make sure that the conclusions came out the way they wanted. But once they didn't, then they entirely flipped themselves on their argument that they had been espousing for the longest time.
We want to get your take on this report that just came out about the White House whistleblower telling a House panel about systematic security clearance, a problem there. Tricia Newbold, she's an 18-year career individual at the White House. She basically, according to Politico among them, saying that as many as 25 White House officials were granted clearance after initially being denied. Obviously Jared Kushner and many others were among the list of those. What do you make of the security clearance where these people were denied and then it was reversed, pressure coming from other places to get them into the White House?
Yeah. So I think there are three things that come to mind for me. Number one, this individual, the White House that the House Democrats should have protected because she was a whistleblower, pretty much outed her by saying she's 18 years in the agency. Here's exactly where she works. Here's how many years she has. Here's her gender. You might as well put her name on it. Number two, at the end of that release, they make it clear that we're not releasing the transcript. So on the one hand, they want all the Mueller report right away, unredacted, and yet when it comes to accusing the White House of something, they make it clear clear in their own release that they have no intention of releasing the transcript of this individual. Third, I mean, let's see what she says, but ultimately security clearances are the ultimate discretion of the President of the United States. There's a big difference, and there's always a human subjectivity to deciding who gets one and who doesn't, and why. That range is a big difference, right? So if someone had, you know, a number of small
congestion pricing plan over the weekend outlining a massive progressive new budget. Includes a new tax on deluxe homes, over $3 million, I believe, an internet sales tax, and most of the money will go to support mass transit, which is the subway system, which makes things go around here. Charles Payne, host of Making Money. Charles Payne, Fox Business Network. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So go ahead and give us your assessment of what Albany's up to.
Well, I mean, you know, they're spending a lot of money, and they need to find it any way they can. They've looked under every cushion, pillow cushion they can find, sofa
every
cushion,
car seat.
every car seat. How's it, you know, I do find interesting, though, the idea that we're going to tax people who drive into the work, into the city, to fix the subway. They're not the reason the subway.
They don't even ride the subway,
exactly.
for goodness sake.
It's like, you know, and that's progressive. That's fair. $1 billion. You know, you just keep going to the different niches out there where you think there's money, and if someone could afford to drive in, particularly from New Jersey, the tolls alone tell you that they must make a certain amount of money. Go back to that well again. $10 to drive in addition. You know, the good news is it starts before 2021, so a lot of people have time to decide if they want to move.
Specs here. $10 to drive into parts of Manhattan, as you point out.
Right.
I think it's 60th Street and below. There's a plastic bag ban that will put an optional 5-cent paper bag tax. Internet sales tax collects 4% New York sales tax on all online purchases. It seems like they're kind of reaching into every pocket they can.
They're reaching into every pocket they can. There's going to be, they're doing some other progressive things, a cash bail system. They're going to get rid of that. 3 hours, you could get paid for 3 hours on election day, go out and vote. They didn't provide that legal marijuana, which some people thought, and also taxes on second homes for the wealthy. So, yeah, they're reaching. There's an opioid tax, too. So it's another one of these big city tax plans that ultimately I don't see how it helps build the city, right? It's not pro-growth. It's about where can we find money, and in many instances, where can we deter people from wanting to even come to this city?
I'm just curious about the backlash in all of this, because this could actually backfire. I mean, if you think about it, okay, so they've got congestion taxes, right, on shared vehicles and all the taxis and all the, you know, car services in the city. They've already implied that. It's like $2.75 extra. Now they've got this other surcharge for people who are hardworking people in the tri-state area that come into New York City. What if all those people were to move into New York City? They just implied a congestion tax to try to relieve congestion, right? Now you're basically telling people it's too expensive to commute into the city, so now we might potentially have an overpopulation issue, which then erases the whole congestion tax that they just put in. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Also, the congestion tax, you know, and it's ultimately it should help like a Lyft and Ubers and all those because it would thin out the roads a little bit.
Carpooling, yes, yeah, but still, I mean,
they're the ones that, I don't know about you, I drive in every day, so we need a one-day course. Like if you're doing this sort of, I love the gig economy and I love the hustle, but just don't stop in the middle of the street. I got to get to work too, right? You know, the Lyft guys are always looking at the thing and they're slowing down, and you're behind them, then they stop. No, hold on, is this the right street? No, move over. Move over. But
you know,
to your point, though, it's destructive. It's not creative. It's destructive.
35,000 feet. The tax plan that was passed by Republicans was said to be penal toward blue states, of which New York is one of them.
Right.
And there were many who thought maybe they would go in a different direction, and they are not. They are piling on, Charles.
Sure. So, and New Jersey will pile on, and Connecticut piles on, because I think these states get, you know, they cross the Rubicon to the point where they become so dependent that they don't know how. There's no creative way for them to stay in office after making all the promises that they've made to get in office in the first place, to ever go back and say, hey, let's do this in a smart way where we'll attract business, where we'll attract, you know, well-heeled, you know, people that live in our cities. So it's a tough one. This is one that's really aimed at people who are making pretty good money, who work in New York City but perhaps don't live here, and it's punishing them.
I mean, we just got punished for owning real estate.
Right.
And now this.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a pylon that's going to continue, even though millions of people have left New York and New Jersey in the last decade.
Watch that story. Thank you, Charles.
I will. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
see you.
So many Republicans joining the Trump administration's efforts to toss out Obamacare entirely, but do they have a plan to replace it? Plus, there is this out of Syria.
I just want to go back home, really. I don't know. I want my son to see my family. I want him to be safe.
So Fox News has been able to contact the so-called ISIS bride you saw on camera there.